Hello and welcome to the Reverend Hunter podcast. This is Tony Jones. I'm the Reverend Hunter, joined as always by the Silas to my Paul, Brandon.
How you doing, Tony? I do not recognize those as well.
No, it's okay. we're running through the Bible. we're getting real close to the end of the Bible, and then I'm going to have to come up with another shtick. Well, Brandon, I'm happy to report that I went to a Super Bowl party. I lasted almost till halftime.
Wow.
And I brought pheasant spring rolls.
Wow. How did those go over?
Oh, pretty good. I mean, I was real happy. I'd never worked with the rice paper stuff before, but it turned out great, actually. Yeah, they were real tasty. Anything you dip in peanut sauce, though.
Yeah, that's
true. You could dip like a shoe leather in peanut sauce, and it would be good.
That's a very good point. I'm sure it tasted better in a shoe, though.
It tasted pretty good. So listen, man, I get the impression that you might be a little bit of a Super Bowl conspiracy theorist.
Oh, I'm not completely a conspiracy theorist, but I also think where there's smoke, there might be a little bit of fire every once in a while, too.
I did see pregame at the beginning of the Super Bowl. They showed some clip of Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, talking to Taylor Swift.
Oh, he's thanking her for all the extra money he just made this year because of his bonuses. So yeah, I'm sure he's talking to her.
I wonder. I haven't seen ratings, but I bet it was a highly rated. I mean, it went to overtime and stuff. I did not watch the second half. I read the paper and went to bed early.
It was. I mean, it was a decent game. It was, well played, well coached, blah blah blah. The same old generic terms. But I mean, I predicted exactly what was going to happen before the game started. It was going to be close. San Francisco is going to be in the lead pretty much the entire time up until the end. It's probably going to go to OT where KC is going to win, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, it almost seems scripted. I'm not saying it is. I'm not crazy conspiracy theorist, but I'm saying it does benefit the NFL to be a little bit like the WWE, where you know the outcome, you play the game, and then you just control it to get the outcome in the end.
How was it controlled? Like, did the refs throw flags at certain points?
No. I mean, it was just mistakes. It just feels like it when you have like the same teams over and over again, and it happens to be the same teams bringing in the most amount of money in the NFL. I don't know.
Right.
But no, it's still fun. It's the only game I actually watched this entire season because, it is what it is.
Well, you hear plenty of sports by engineering all these sports podcasts. So
I know. And if I went on the sports podcast and said this, I'd get lamented for sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I think you got to throw this up there in one of those Talk North podcasts and just go deep in the conspiracy theories.
Hey, man, that doesn't fit their objective, the sports journalists.
All right. Well, my guest this week, as you know, Brandon, is Fisher Neal. He founded a thing called Learn to Hunt New York. And he's an actor in New York City. But his actual, how he's making his money these days is he has this incredible endeavor where he takes people out to hunt. And it's just what caught my attention is it's not something you would think about, that there's an actor in New York City who takes people from New York City into the woods of New Jersey to deer hunt. But when you hear him talk about it, it's surprising how much opportunity there is. I mean, there's like, for instance, it's a 5-month-long season for bow hunting and crossbow hunting, and you can shoot an unlimited number of does because, as you might guess, in that neck of the woods, there's not really any natural predators of deer, white-tailed deer, except for cars, I guess. So he's made a career out of this, which is a pretty amazing deal.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly smart. He picked the right niche market in the right place to do something like this.
Yeah. So we have a great conversation about just how he does it. Sorry about that. About how he does it and how his clients find them, and him, and how he actually runs a hunt day in and day out. But he's just coming to the end of his season. I think just this past weekend, he had his last hunt of the season. So fascinating guy, interesting conversation. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Thanks as always for listening. We'd love you to share, rate, and review the Reverend Hunter podcast. If you've got ideas for guests or sponsors, drop us a line. You can always get a hold of me through all the socials. And again, thanks for listening. And until next time, here is my conversation with Fisher Neal. Hey, Fisher, thanks for coming on the Reverend Hunter podcast, man.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
I've been following you on the socials, and let's talk about the hunting actor. That's a funny little niche-y deal. Like if I'm the hunting preacher, it might be even more niche-y to be the hunting actor. Just not probably a lot of New York City based actors who are also hunters.
Yeah, I would have told you that the number is 0, but I know of 3 others.
Okay.
But there are a lot of actors in New York, so, I guess it was inevitable that there would be 1 or 2 more.
Yeah. Tell me, how did you find those other 2 or 3?
Well, one of them started dating someone who I went to school with, and she was like, "You guys have to be friends." And we are. And then one of them was one of his friends. And the other guy is just someone who randomly, I think, found me on Instagram. And we just connected. And he was like, "I'm a hunter too." And we follow each other. And I've never actually met him in person.
Yeah. Which came first in your life, hunting or acting?
Hunting by a mile.
Tell me, did you grow up hunting?
Yeah, my dad was into hunting. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he'd grown up in Paris, which is a rural part of West Tennessee. And so, he was into hunting. And so, like, hunting was foundational to my identity since I was a little kid. As a 5-6-year-old, I couldn't wait to tag along, and started tagging along around that time, 6 or 7. Early season archery hunting and dove hunting were the things I could do at first. And then it was like, I couldn't wait for the day that I could take my hunter education course. And of course, my dad was all about it and happy to bring all of his sons. I have 2 brothers, all of us along. And so hunting was a huge part of my life through middle school and high school. And it was only in high school that I found passion for performing on stage in the theater. I started doing like a lot of impressions, actually. Just
really?
like at home, I would do like Ace Ventura impressions and stuff, and Forrest Gump. And my dad was like, "You should take speech class." And so like, and I was pretty active in church at the time, and started kind of being in a little bit more of the like public speaking position, like leading a service or whatever. And so that kind of led me toward, I took speech class, and then that led to theater. And probably one of the biggest things was the high school musical that was done in my sophomore year of high school. It was Once on This Island. And I was just blown away by it, and captivated by the idea that I could maybe do that too.
So you weren't in it that year. You weren't in the musical. Okay.
No.
But my listeners are going to want to know, what brand of church was that you grew up in?
That was Church of Christ, the non-denominational Church of Christ. Which
instruments, or there's Church of Christ. No instruments, dude. That's hardcore.
For the older folks, clapping was even a little like but the youth group, we would clap in songs and stuff. But yeah, everything was a cappella.
Oh man.
In worship. And so yeah, pretty traditional in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And you did a little preaching there when you were in high school?
A little bit, yeah. Okay. I did like a couple of times. Like I went to this summer program a few times at Blue Ridge Encampment. It was like sort of like a summer devotional type of thing that was actually with like all ages. It was like families. Mm-hmm. But the youth would have their own meetings and services. And I definitely led a couple of services there. And yeah, I had like a strong voice and a presence on stage. I wasn't afraid of the audience.
Yeah, I took preaching class in seminary, of course, which is required. And then I got invited into an advanced preaching seminar, which was taught by this very august Englishman named Ian Pitt Watson.
Mm,
And he told us that he said any great preacher could have been a great actor and vice versa.
mm.
Yeah, so that was really part of his the way he trained us in preaching was to kind of carry the room, that um the way you stage actors do. Don't you have to kind of what's it like, act to the back row of the theater?
Yes, indeed. You have to modulate your performance to the size of the space. So, in thinking of exactly that, like what is the farthest away member of the audience and how will they be able to actually understand what you're doing? So, the one extreme is on camera work where the audience is 6 inches from your face. And the other extreme would be a, huge touring house with 2,000 seats and the audience member is like 500 feet from you.
Mm-hmm.
Things that you would do for in one make no sense in the other.
Right.
Vocally, physically, in on camera, it's mostly about what happens on your face, but to the back of a theater that's big, they can't even see your face, man.
Right. I was just trying to explain this to my kids because over the holidays we went to see A Christmas Carol at the Guthrie Theater, which is our big regional
Oh
theater
yeah,
here in the
I'm
Twin
familiar.
Cities. Yeah, and great theater. But I was saying to them because of course they're my kids are in their late teens and early 20s, almost totally unfamiliar with the stage and so familiar with screens,
Mm,
and watching people on screen and saying, well, it might seem campy or hokey because it seems like they're overacting, but they're trying to fill this enormous room with 1,500 seats or whatever, and make sure everybody can hear them and see them. And that's the difference between acting on the stage and acting on a screen.
yeah, I actually did some work at the Metropolitan Opera in New York.
Uh-huh.
And that is probably the most extreme thing I've seen. That's a 3,000 seat house. And there it is. And even the closest audience member is like, on the other side of an entire orchestra from you. So, in
Wow.
that, everything you're doing, I was performing as a non singing actor. Everything that you're doing is entirely body language communication,
Yeah.
in a pretty exaggerated way.
So how'd you get from watching that musical in 10th grade to being a working actor in New York? To take me on that journey a little bit.
Well, I wish I could say that I am a working actor. I'm still an actor, but I don't work a lot. But the basically next year, I auditioned for the musical theater class, and boys that want to be in musical theater class were not numerous at the time. So I got immediately in the class and was playing the lead role in Bye Bye Birdie the very next year.
Wow.
I'd never even had a singing lesson, and that role had 7 solos and a duet.
Oh my gosh,
It
dude.
was it
But
was honestly,
you'd grown up singing a cappella harmonies in church, so
I had done that.
you had little practice.
I had done that, but this is a totally different ball game.
Right.
And like, yeah, it was honestly like one of the most terrifying things I ever did before I
Hmm.
went on. Like I used to, for the first couple of years of doing it, I ended up playing the lead in Oklahoma the next year in high school. And both times before the show opened, I had like an emotional meltdown, because the
Wow.
pressure was just so intense. I'm going to screw it up, right? I'm like, is that raw stage fright. But by the end of Oklahoma, especially, I was hooked on it. It's such a thrill to be in front of the audience, and I started to have enough sort of confidence in myself that I thought, okay, I can do this. But it was really just a hobby at that point. It wasn't until I got into my freshman year of high school of college, that it started to seem like, okay, well, I'm actually like, at least for around here, I'm now all of a sudden a big fish in a small pond. Like, I'm getting asked to do things. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, maybe I could actually do this for a living. And I just kept on going down that road. And the further I went down the road, the further it seemed to be that I could go. I spent a summer at this fancy festival called Williamstown after my freshman year of college. And, I got cast in a play, even though I was just like, basically the apprentices there are like, you pay to be slave labor.
Oh, wow.
And you get a few classes, but you're like hanging out with like big time people. There were like movie and Broadway stars in this play that I was in. So that very much like sort of pushed me through in college. So in college, I was just like insanely dedicated to developing myself as a singer, as a dancer, as an actor, so that I could try to be this sort of multi-threat performer. And ended up after college. So I did like summer stock jobs every summer. And then after college, I started doing non-union gigs around, mostly like tours of things.
Okay.
I did like this terrible, like bizarre children's theater knockoff of Beauty and the Beast that like went all over the like north and eastern half of the United States. Okay. Very much a rite of passage. They pay you like $200 a week, and you drive around. You drive 8 hours to Buffalo, and then you perform for like 800 fourth graders with a set that you built that morning, and then you pack it up into a truck, and the 6 of you drive, another 8 hours to Schenectady and stay in like the crappiest Night's Inn you've ever seen, and then do it again for like 3-4 months. I did a Renaissance fair. I did Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. I did Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey's tour, where they do Shakespeare shows for school age kids around New Jersey.
It makes me think of Station 11 a little bit. Have you ever read that? Have you read that novel?
I've never read it. I've heard something about it. It's like being stuck in Greenland or Antarctica.
No, these guys are. This is like a post-apocalyptic deal, and it's like a traveling Shakespeare. Like the entire
like
society is broken down.
Yes,
and there's there's nothing. There's no electricity. There's no planes don't fly. There's no gas. And they're going from like little encampment from one to the next, performing Shakespeare and just like trying to keep it alive,
Yeah. Yeah. It is quite a bit like that, making barely anything, but, when I got after doing that for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to try and sort of move up the ladder of jobs. And the quickest way to do that is if you can get into one of the top graduate programs. So there's these graduate acting programs at NYU and Yale and Juilliard, UCSD. There's a few others, but if you can get into one of those, you can come out of it on the other end, especially in the New York market, like with an agent and able to audition for like network TV shows and off Broadway or even Broadway sometimes. So that's what I was able to do. I was accepted to the master's program at Yale, and I spent 3 years there. And that's really where the combination of hunting and acting started to become a potential future business idea, because when I went there, I was really fearful that I was going to be in a situation where everybody thought I was like this evil bad man who murders poor innocent animals,
Yeah.
But Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, had recently come out in the last few years, and man, everyone who I encountered once they understood for sure that I was eating all this meat, um, suddenly I was actually really cool, and people thought this
Hmm.
was amazing, and they wanted to learn about it and to know about it. And I had like a 20-person list that I would email to when I was going to go, particularly turkey hunting, because it was easy for someone to tag along. And I would offer for people to come, and several people did. And so when I moved to the city and was looking for ways to make a living that weren't bartending or waiting tables, I just thought there's got to be more people in a city of this size who would be willing and interested enough to pay somebody to teach them what is, we all know as hunters, is an incredibly steep learning curve.
Oh my gosh.
And,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you don't have a family member or a very close friend who's willing to make some sacrifices and share it with you, that there's almost no way in. So,
Yeah, man, it's super intimidating. I talk to people about this all the time. It's and I started hunting as an adult. I didn't have the benefit of growing up hunting like you did.
oh no,
So yeah, so I had to make my way into it, and I have a pretty forceful personality, and I'm not afraid to ask people for things. But I think for a lot of people, they're just like, I don't even know where you begin. But I guess like when you go to New York, then sure, there are people who might want to hunt, but good Lord, what an overwhelming thing to think, like, how do you even market that? Like, how do you let people know that this is even available?
well, the beautiful thing about the time we live in now is that it's possible to be found by people who are looking for such a thing.
Hmm.
In my research prior to starting the business, I would Google search queries like learn to hunt near me, learn to hunt in New York. And
Okay.
there were zero relevant responses.
Really?
I mean, the stuff you would get would be like one random article from like 3 years ago on Outdoor Life magazine, or like Real Tree Camo magazine on how to get started as a hunter.
Uh-huh.
Nothing at all relevant, and certainly nobody offering what I was looking to offer. So at that point, it was just a matter of paying for a website service. I use Wix, and as part of that package, they have a search engine optimization functionality so that you can get your site listed and able to be found on Google. And since there's no other relevant, competition, once I got that going, I was the top hit, and I should
Wow.
still be the top hit if you search on Google, like Learn to Hunt New York. And of course, I named the business that as well so that it would be, more easily found. And so that's still where probably 80% of my business comes from, is just organic search. People start
Wow.
searching, like, where can I learn? Where can I find a hunting guide around here? And they find me that way.
I mean, in some ways, Fisher, you'd think people, when if they're moving to New York City, they would probably like forsake the idea of hunting. Like, well, I'm moving to New York. I'll probably never hunt. You
I
know?
did.
Yeah.
That was my thinking. I mean, that was one of the things I was really torn about, it in terms of whether or not I would pursue acting as a genuine, like, if I was really going to go for it, because you have to live around here, and here or LA or something. And I just thought, well, hunting will become something that I do once or twice a year when I go home for the holidays. And it turns out that, well, I just didn't know really how much was possible. And I did a lot of research, and I ended up actually moving to New Jersey. Um, I spent 10 years living in Jersey City, which is, for those who don't know, it's right next to Hoboken. And there's a non-subway, a different type of commuter train called the PATH train. It's just like the subway. I could get into Manhattan and Greenwich Village in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, by being in New Jersey, there was two key things. One is the firearms rules were much more reasonable. And the most important thing was that they're within an hour drive of Jersey City. there is probably, gosh, pushing 100,000 acres of public land you could deer hunt on.
Wow. Okay.
And in that entire area, the deer numbers are high enough that the bag limits are unlimited does for
Holy
5
smokes!
months.
And what's the hunting pressure like on that public land?
It's high.
Okay. Okay.
But, so you got to learn how to work it, and not all the public land is getting pressured in the same ways, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a ton of deer, and, you can hunt them for 5 months and you can bait them. So it was kind of a no brainer that, whereas if I lived on the New York side, the places where you can hunt are like, you've got to drive probably about 2 hours west on Long Island. There is quite good public land deer hunting out there. Then, or drive like 2 hours north up into like the lower parts of upstate New York. But, it's a longer drive. It's hard to do that as a day trip. Going north, you would definitely be paying bridge tolls. So it didn't make sense to go into New York. So I ended up in Jersey, and just like the New York Giants and the New York Jets,
right?
I am actually in New Jersey, and I market to New York.
Gotcha. Well, I did my doctoral work in Princeton, so I took the New Jersey Transit train a lot of times right through that stretch, because I always would fly out of Newark, of course, and there are plenty of people really rich people who live in Princeton and train into New York City to make their millions every day.
All over North Jersey, man. It's full of like big time upper 1% stuff,
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So, I of course, I think of like public hunting land in New Jersey, and all I can think of is that one episode of The Sopranos, where Paulie and Christopher get stuck. Do you remember that? They get stuck in a car with like a Ukrainian dude, and they try to hunt him down in the woods, and it's snowing out, and Tony and Pussy have to go rescue him. I don't know if you're a Sopranos guy, but
I tried to get my wife into it so we could watch the series, and unfortunately she didn't love it enough for us to keep going.
No, my wife would never watch The Sopranos with me, but I'm telling you, man, if you get the chance, you just got to find that one episode where they go, they're out in the woods in New Jersey they're all bad guys, because I can't say like the good guys are trying to hunt down the bad guys, because everybody in that show is a bad guy,
right?
Which is what's so genius about that show. But anyway, that's my little TV acting hunting scene. And among Sopranos fans, there's like all sorts of memes about that, because this one big gangster Pussy puts on a blaze orange vest and takes out a hunting rifle, and they're all like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I hunt deer. I grew up hunting deer." And they all look at him like, "What are you talking about?" Like, they shoot people, not deer. Those guys.
Yeah. Why would you be so cruel?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. I got some questions for you, because I've mentored people. What do you do about like, it's one thing to take somebody out and teach them how to fish, but taking them out to hunt, there's like firearms, you're climbing in trees, there's liability. Like those must have been some rather big hurdles to clear.
Yes and no. I mean, it all depends on how much risk you're willing to take on. The whole liability thing, it's definitely there. But I didn't really have any assets you could take when I started this business.
Right, okay.
And sometimes you just gotta take some risks. Now, of course, I have like an LLC and liability insurance, and I have people sign a waiver. So, it's not too big a deal. But certainly, the firearms thing is, it's not that bad, because like kind of my main format that I use, if somebody says, "Oh, I want to hunt, I've never hunted before, if they don't have time, if it's not preseason to take a lesson with me, we essentially do a day that starts with lessons and ends in a hunt. So,
Okay.
I'll spend an hour or 2 hours on the shooting range going through safety and how to shoot the gun well. Or, I mean, honestly, we do more with a crossbow than we do with the
Oh,
gun. And that's
okay.
a big thing, big thing for hunter recruitment is using crossbows.
Why is that?
But
Wait, I want to ask you about that. What do you
huge.
think that's about? Is it fear of firearms? What?
There's a number of factors. Fear of firearms is one. A lot of people living in cities, not only are there stigma around firearm ownership, either for themselves or they're worried about other people, or like my friends who live in New York City, it's a big hassle. That's expensive to even own a deer rifle and have it in your house.
Okay.
But the more important thing is the number of available days when they could go.
Oh, gotcha. Because
People are
the rifle
busy.
season is so much shorter.
People are busy, man.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, rifle season in New York, I think is 2 weeks. In New Jersey, there's a fairly long shotgun season. We don't do rifles, unfortunately, but the shotgun season is like 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Okay.
And so from a hunter recruitment standpoint, right, like the people who can kind of like afford to try it out and get into it are people typically who are, fairly recently out of college and have a decent job and or a young family. And getting time to set that aside when that can happen is very sporadic. Most of my clients can only get away for a day or two to actually do a hunt. So, for some of them that falls in September and some of that falls in February. And if those dates are not available to them when they can go, then they just can't. And so, a compound bow, and certainly any traditional bows, is something that requires a lot of dedication, a lot of pre-thought, a lot of investment ahead of time. Whereas a crossbow, I can literally just say, yeah, come out with me and I'll show you how to shoot it and we'll go hunt a deer and you can try it and see if you want to go further. It's so much easier. And there's just so much more time. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have wondered at times because following you on Instagram, I'm like, dang, he's still shooting deer. How is he still shooting deer? But you say
it's crazy.
If the New Jersey season is 5 months long and obviously with an abundance of deer and like no limit on does, I suppose not much for natural predators other than human beings with those deer. But here's I got a question. It's funny because here in Minnesota, crossbows have suddenly become very controversial because the Minnesota legislature passed a law saying that crossbows count during archery season. And you can use a crossbow anytime during archery season, which is quite a bit longer, as you might guess. I mean, we have archery for like 2 months, like all September and October. And then you have 2 weeks of firearm. And then you have muzzle loader. And all through that time, archery season is still going on till the end of the year.
Right.
And the traditionalists have gotten real upset about the legislature kind of, without even checking with the Department of Natural Resources and wildlife biologists and stuff. They just were like, let's have more people hunting. And what's interesting is, an interesting little side note is we have a very big Hmong population. People who are displaced from Cambodia during the Vietnam War. A lot of them settled in Minnesota. They love to hunt deer. And it was Hmong legislators from the Twin Cities who, they must have heard about this from their constituents. They pushed for this law. It was passed. And now a lot of hunters are up in arms because they're like, no, it's too easy to kill a deer with a crossbow. That's not archery hunting, other than, of course, people who have, handicaps or shoulder injuries and they can't pull back a compound bow or whatever. So what do you think about that? That argument that crossbow hunting makes it too easy during archery season?
I hate that argument, even though
Okay.
the reality of it is true that it makes harvesting a deer easier. The reason that I hate that argument is because it's selfish,
Hmm.
because it's like a hoarding mentality of like those resources are for me. And I want to hunt in a certain way that is about my ego more than anything.
Yeah.
That's my point of view on like the real motivation behind people using that as the reason why you shouldn't hunt with a crossbow. You know, um, they'll say that they seem to think that people will take worse shots, like that you'll end up in like with more crippled deer because of the crossbow. Um, and they will say that like, yeah, it's like a unfair competition, right? They're like, I don't want someone to shoot a deer too easily that I won't be able to shoot.
Right.
But you know, they could turn around and go get a crossbow. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. So, you know, it really to me comes down to, in terms of whether or not they're being utilized, uh, how big of a need do you have to have new people hunting? As far as I know, we have a major crisis on our hands in terms of the number of people participating in hunting. So, for that reason, I would say that, you know, we should be expanding crossbow hunting wherever it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in Western states where you have higher demand for the hunt than there is resource, obviously there a lower success rate makes sense because we want to allow more people to be able to participate, and we want to be able to fund those fish and game agencies through that participation. So adding crossbows that would increase the harvest rate, I think, would be probably not the best idea. But in places where we have lots of deer and we're not worried about the harvest rate going up, um, in those places, it's silly not to. And also, I also have come to feel like, you know, so many people make the argument that crossbows are less ethical, like less morally superior. They're morally
Right.
inferior to using
Yes.
the bow, and I actually have a real problem with that because, you know, I've been bow hunting since I was 14 or 15, and you know, it takes a lot of time to be able to shoot well enough on the hunt in order to always make a good clean kill on the deer. And even when I am practicing, I screw up sometimes.
Yeah.
When I'm shooting a crossbow, i'm I'm not shooting past 40 yards because I'm worried about the speed of the projectile and the deer moving, even though I have the accuracy. um, and I hit exactly what I want to hit every single time,
Hmm.
and those deer die quick every single time.
Really.
Um, you know, I take people who've never shot a bow or a gun in their life, and they don't all do perfectly on the hunt, of course, but most of them make a quick, you know, ethical kill on the deer that, you know, it's just, I feel like there's a strong argument to be made that it's more responsible and
Hmm.
morally superior to use the most effective weapon available. Um, and you know, like in the UK, they don't allow archery hunting because they don't consider it to be as effective as rifle hunting.
Yeah.
So it really is, I think, people who are in a closed loop of ideation within a particular culture that they've grown up with in the United States, you know, and they're not allowing themselves to see outside of, you know, that closed loop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. And it's interesting because I've only been a rifle hunter, and people, oh, you got to try, bow hunting. It'll change your hunt. And I've said I will once my kids are out of the house, and my last kid is just now left for college. So this might be the year, but I got to tell you, man, it's very tempting to get a crossbow because uh, not just because it's easier, but because I have yet to lose a deer that I've shot with a rifle. And I'm fortunate in that. I've only been deer hunting for 10 years. But it does worry me that I would that I'd cripple a deer but not recover it. And I think there's less chance of that if I were to use a crossbow.
There's definitely less chance. It's
Yeah.
orders of magnitude harder with the compound bow.
Yeah. You must, because of what you get to do, you must have amazing stories of people you've taken out on their first hunts. What's that like? Take me on a day when you take somebody out after you've taken them to the rifle range. Are you sitting in the stand with them? Or like what's the process?
So most commonly what I'm doing is I'm hanging hang-on stands back to back on a tree.
Okay.
And since a lot of it's public land, I'm like carrying climbing sticks in and out so nobody can steal or mess with my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we sit back to back on the tree, and I spend a lot of time at the shooting range portion explaining the various scenarios that can happen to try and reduce the amount of talking that I would need to do if and when a deer comes in.
Oh, interesting. Sure.
I've learned over time that like I used to just try and coach in the moment and say, okay, pick up the bow, or wait. And what I found is that it's really difficult for me for that whole explanation to happen and for them to understand what to do in the moment, because it's like, you need to pick up the bow when the deer's head is behind that tree, and in that one little second you need to know that that's what you've got to do and when. So I spend a lot of time prepping people. After we do just basic shooting on the range, I'll have this long conversation about, this is what it means when a deer is bobbing its head and looking our way. This is what it means when a deer is stomping its foot.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the different ways that a deer will decide that it wants to leave, right? And how you can potentially still succeed in that scenario. And then, and a lot of time talking about shot placement and what the different outcomes might be. And so then we get up in the stand, and I'll sort of put them through a process of, here's the rangefinder, get your landmarks situated, and now practice aiming at everything so that you know how you can get steady, aiming to this spot or that spot. What can you not do? What's in the way? And then, try and tell me if there's a deer coming. Don't point at it. I can't tell you the number of times people point. They'll say, I see a deer, and I say, where? And they like pick up their arm and point, and they're like, it's 40 yards right over there. I'm like, what are you doing?
No.
But people see so many deer around like the suburbs here that don't even care about people. They don't realize that deer where you can hunt are a totally different, thing. And then when the deer come, I have, everything that runs the gamut. Some people are like totally calm and just like execute the thing perfectly and seem to not even get an adrenaline rush. And then I get other people who were shot great on the range, and now they like panic, and they can I can hear them breathing and see them shaking, and it's like hardcore buck fever for like a button buck that's standing on a pile of corn in front of them. And completely missing sometimes because of that stuff. I've occasionally had people who freaked out because of fear of heights. I now have like a questionnaire that I'll have people answer before we go on the hunt. So I know if they have fear of heights, I can put them in a ground blind.
Sure. Okay.
Though sometimes I really like to show people that you don't need a tree stand. So a decent number of times I will just hunt from the ground, like next to a big old oak tree or next to a blowdown or something, if it's the right situation. And certainly once the leaves get off the trees, you're not always doing yourself that much good by being up in the tree where the deer can silhouette you so easily, especially with two dudes. It's really hard to hide two dudes, especially when one doesn't know how to stay still very well. So, like I've had really good luck, like sitting in a boulder field or up against a big tree, and just setting it up so the deer just don't notice that we're there.
Yeah, yeah. And then are you you're field dressing the deer? Are you well, let me ask before you even get to that. Do you when you come down out of the stand with a client, it must be a very emotional for some of them.
Definitely.
Do you do any kind of ritual, or is there any way when you approach the deer, is there a way that you do that, or is it a case by case basis, or what?
I kind of like a lot of parts of hunting, I kind of have gone back and forth as to what I do. Or what I've done with a lot of people over the years is I adopted this Austrian ritual of the last meal.
Hmm.
So we kind of like break off take some grass or green leaves or something and place it in the deer's mouth, and then just take a moment to say thank you.
Huh.
I used to be pretty serious about always doing that. But a lot of the time it's like, half an hour after dark, and I'm, 45 minutes from the butcher, who's also an hour from my house, and I'm just like wanting to get this done.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, it kind of varies, and it does depend on the person. Some people react to it in a visibly emotional way. And so I'll move slower, take some more time,
Yeah.
lead them through something like that. Um, because it is shocking for a lot of people, especially to walk up on the animal and be like, wow, as we all know as hunters, like it's it's a different experience to walk
Yeah.
up on an animal
Well,
that you have killed.
I just killed something. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was such a common experience for our ancestors who probably, killed animals weekly for food,
Yeah.
farm animals or wild animals. And you're taking people from New York City who've, they've seen a squashed squirrel on the ground or something, but they slapped a mosquito on their arm, but they're not in the habit of killing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
And then, yeah, uh, do you field dress it? Do you make them field dress it? Is it a combo? Because that's such. I mean, I think when I shot my first deer, my most visceral memories are of the field dressing, even more
mm,
than the shot and the kill.
yeah, it is something that holds a lot of weight for people. Um, some people don't want to do it, um, which is fine with me because I can do it in about 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And teaching them to do it takes usually a half an hour. But most people want to do it, either out of a sense of obligation or because they want to learn. I actually get the number one thing I hear from people about why they don't feel comfortable trying a hunt on their own is not what they found in the fish and game polls about land availability. It's they're afraid that they won't gut the animal correctly and that they'll ruin the meat. That is, I hear it
Yeah,
from almost every single person.
that's interesting. Yeah,
And it's especially interesting because it's very much a fallacy, right? Like worst case scenario, you cut open the stomach, and maybe there's a funky taste on some of your meat, but like the only thing you can do wrong is just not do it.
yeah,
And it's not rocket science, like cut it and get the stuff out. You'll figure it out,
yeah.
right? But people have a lot of fear around it. So most of my clients really want to learn, and so they'll either say, "No, no, no, no," like just guide me through it, and I want to do it myself, or let's do it together. That's what I've been doing more lately. Is like, I'll kind of do it with them and make a couple of the cuts here, or start a cut so that they see how the cut
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to go. Um, and I found that I think the best hybrid of where they're like hands on and learning, but yes, it also doesn't take like half an hour, 40 minutes because they, you know, can't figure out how to make a cut.
Right, right, right. Oh man, well that's must be a very intense experience. Do you have people coming back and saying, "I want you to take me on my second hunt as well. I'm not quite ready to do it myself."
Yeah, the thing that really doesn't surprise me anymore, but when I first got going with the business, that surprised me the most was that the majority of my sales are repeat clients.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
it's a number of things. Part of it is the fact that, yes, the learning curve is really steep. Um, and so people feel like they have more to learn, but also, you've got people who have really busy lives and live in a city environment. Some of them live in Manhattan. And so like the time and effort it would take them to do the scouting, to set the thing up, to have their own equipment, is actually pretty out of reach. So
Yeah.
I actually just become their, like, 1 to 3 days out of a year, they book me to get their deer. And then they come back next year.
Wow.
Especially because they learn, pretty much between September and the middle of November. I mean, we knock them down. We do really well.
I bet you
So,
do. Well, based on your Instagram, yeah. And
yeah.
I'm guessing though, this is speculation, but you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. For hunting is also, there's a communal aspect to it. It's something that people will like to share. And
Hmm.
if one of your clients doesn't have anyone else to go hunt with, they're probably like, well, I'd like to go back out with Fisher. Like I had a good time with him, and
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Certainly, some of my clients have been regular enough that they start to cross over into the friend zone.
Yeah. So have you got, like, how's business? Do you have more queries than you can manage, or and you're
It's
obviously
good.
only doing it 5 months a year, so it's not like it's a year-round business.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a commercial fisherman or something,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
I'd say for 3 to 4 months of that season, I'm working nonstop 7 days a week
Wow.
for extended hours, either with clients or prepping for clients.
Mhm.
Um, in September, in those first 3 months, September through, well, really even into December, I do typically have more inquiries than I can manage. And so I have a couple of guys on staff I'll bring them in, like, say, if I have 2 people or 3 that want to hunt together, each person on these, even if it wasn't the law with the apprentice license, I would want one-on-one
Yeah.
mentorship for sitting
Yeah.
in the blind. And they do too. So I'll hire them for that. But I'll also hire them to run hunts on their own. And then, like, now things typically slow down, January, February, fewer people are thinking about hunting. My regulars have all already gotten their deer. So, it ranges from like 2 to 3 a week to, like my last one, I've just got one this week on Saturday. That'll be my last deer hunt of the season with a
Wow.
client.
Dang, that is a long season. Holy smokes.
Yeah. We
And
close on the 17th.
do you stop going on auditions when you're in the height of deer hunting season?
I still audition.
Do you?
It's
Oh my
very
gosh.
challenging. But the one thing that I really don't do is in the summer, I don't audition for theater shows that happen in the fall.
Okay.
Because theater hardly pays anything and is out of town and is a 50-hour work week. So, it's going to pay like $700-800 a week. And that's what I'm charging per day.
Right. Right.
So I basically forsake theater for that time frame. But and the main acting stuff I'm trying to do anyway is film and television, because that's the only place you can really, like, get the spark to your career.
Uh-huh.
And that's the only place you can make a decent wage, for the most part. So, but yeah, so I audition for stuff, and it can be really hard sometimes. I'll get an audition that's sent to me on, like, Friday afternoon, and it's due Monday morning, and I have 2 full day deer hunts, Saturday and Sunday. So the sleep factor, the literal ability to even sit and read the audition pages can be really challenging.
Dang, dude.
If I were to get that job, I would just, like, try and cover it with staff or reschedule or whatever, because the types of auditions I'm taking, if I got the job, most all of these jobs would be like career changing opportunities.
Yeah.
And pretty remunerative, most of them.
Yeah. The one big break. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at in my career. A lot of why I'm not a working actor is because it's like, if you just continue doing like the theater out of town, or the like one line role on whatever TV show, you hit a glass ceiling that you cannot rise above.
I believe it.
The only way to get past it is to just keep on swinging and only taking auditions for really big stuff. So like, like my agent won't submit me for any type of, under 5-minute role on television. They won't submit me for.
You've done your Law and Order dead body.
I've done it.
Bit.
Yeah. I did 3. I did Blind Spot, which is the tattoo lady who was like, had amnesia. That one was fun. I had 3 days on set as a hitman. 3 scenes, shot 2 people, and then got shot. Okay. And then I did Person of Interest, which was literally, it was 1 day, and it was like, sir, there's people inside the facility. And they're like, okay, go. And then my Law and Order was probably my best one. It was 1 day on set, but it was like a legitimate, like really dramatic scene with the lead actors in 2 scenes. But yeah, like nothing like that. Anything moving forward, it needs to be like I'm a guest star, where it's like I'm the bad guy, or I'm a really important character with an arc. You have to get a couple of those for things to really open up in your career. Or you've got to get like, off Broadway major role, like in a show that everybody likes. That's kind of the other way in. The Broadway stuff is either you're an understudy, or you're already a star.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes they get really big casts and you can get in as a small role, and that would be worth it. But those opportunities are just incredibly rare, and I haven't landed one.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this, man. It's fascinating, and I don't know. Yeah, when I first ran across your stuff, I just thought, well, that's an interesting niche. I'm familiar with New York City. One of my kids currently lives in Manhattan, and it's to get people from New York City out into the woods to shoot a deer is that's a calling, and I'm glad you're doing it, because it's people like you bringing new hunters into the fold that's going to keep it alive. Hopefully so. I mean, I really feel like it's an all hands on deck kind of situation. It's going to take both volunteerism and people like me, because, I have the blessing that I am getting to hunt all the time, and I'm doing what I love for work. But it's also, it's the time when I most would like to be recreating, and hunting just for myself. Yeah, of course.
And I pretty much, when it comes to like shooting a big deer, I ruin all of my spots in order to put clients on people. And I would much rather somebody shoot, their first deer as a doe and blow up a spot where I know there's an old buck than keep that spot just for me in the hopes that I'll get that deer. You have to be willing to sacrifice to a certain extent. That's where I think the professional aspect of being a mentor is valuable. And I feel like it's being discouraged and should be encouraged, that more people could professionally mentor people, because mentorship really does take so much time away from hunting.
Yeah, man. I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, and I've had people ask me, "Can I pay you to teach me how to hunt?" And I have never done it. But I've thought about it, and you're right. I think there are people who kind of look down on what you do and think, "Oh, it should be purely altruistic," and
Yeah, I get comments like that on my Instagram. They're like, "Oh, I thought you did it just out of the goodness of your heart." And it's like, well, I mean, I have to make a living at something, and if I'm getting paid to do this, I can do it a lot more.
That's right.
I would wager that I'm the most prolific mentor of hunters in America. I don't know of anyone else who comes remotely close. Like the number of people I've put on their first deer and taken them and taught them to shoot. Like, we're talking 50 new people every year, probably. In the
That's
last
incredible.
10 years, I mean, hundreds that I've taken out. And the only reason that's possible for me to handle that volume is because I'm getting paid. If it was just, otherwise I would just have to be like some retired guy or just somebody who's rich and doesn't need to work. But I don't think we have enough of those.
No. And the truth is that all in, for someone to pay you a few $100 to go out for a day, I mean, hunting can be an expensive deal too. It's like, it's not only a steep learning curve, but if you don't have the gear, you're helping people in many ways. So no, I think it's fantastic. It's going to take all types, like you say. So I appreciate what you're doing, and it'd be fun to hunt together someday, maybe.
It would.
Well, thanks, Fisher, man. I really appreciate you coming on and taking a chance to come on the podcast and talk about this. I love what you're doing, and I hope you keep doing it, and I hope you land that big breakout role.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
All right.
It was great to be here.
Thanks.